Platinum Medical Center stood like a crystal tower against the morning sky, its glass walls reflecting the bustling city below. This was not just any hospital. This was where the wealthy came to heal, where money could buy the finest medical care in the world. Every surface gleamed with perfection, from the marble floors to the gold-trimmed elevators that whispered softly as they carried patients to their luxury suites. At the very top of this medical empire sat Damien Cross, a man who had built his fortune before turning 30. His corner office overlooked the entire city, but he rarely enjoyed the view. Instead, he spent his days studying profit reports and quality assessments with the same intensity that others might reserve for life or death decisions. To Damien, everything was a life or death decision when it came to his business. Damien had inherited wealth, but he had multiplied it through smart investments and ruthless business decisions. He owned 3 hospitals, 2 medical research facilities, and a pharmaceutical company. People called him brilliant. They also called him heartless. He preferred brilliant. His perfectly tailored suit never showed a wrinkle. His dark hair was always styled to perfection, and his steel-gray eyes could make grown doctors stumble over their words. At 28, he commanded respect through fear rather than admiration. He had learned early that emotions were weaknesses, and weaknesses could destroy empires. The angel arrives 3 floors below Damien's office. Sophia Rain was adjusting her simple blue uniform and trying not to feel overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. She had worked in public hospitals for 5 years, places where they fought to save lives with outdated equipment and overworked staff. Here, even the waiting rooms looked like 5-star hotel lobbies. Sophia came from a family of teachers and social workers. Her parents had sacrificed everything to put her through nursing school, and she had graduated with honors and a heart full of dreams about helping people. She had blonde hair that she kept in a practical ponytail, green eyes that sparkled with kindness, and a smile that could comfort the most frightened patient. She had taken this job not for the prestige, but because she needed better pay to help support her younger brother's college education. Her family had always been rich in love, but poor in money, and Sophia understood the value of both. "Welcome to paradise," said Jessica, the head nurse who was showing Sophia around. Jessica was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes, but tired shoulders. "The patients here are different from what you're used to. They expect service, not just medical care." Sophia nodded, taking mental notes as they walked through halls that looked more like art galleries than hospital corridors. "What about the owner?" "I heard he's very involved in daily operations." Jessica's expression changed slightly. "Mr. Cross is demanding. He expects perfection from everyone, and he has very little patience for mistakes. Most nurses transfer too. Other departments, within 6 months, he's brilliant, but he can be quite cold." They stopped at a nurse's station where several staff members were quietly going about their duties. The atmosphere felt tense, as if everyone was waiting for something unpleasant to happen. "Speak of the devil," Jessica whispered as the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. The first collision. Damien Cross stepped out of the elevator like a king entering his court. His presence immediately changed the energy in the hallway. Conversations stopped, shoulders straightened, and everyone suddenly became very focused on their work. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that announced his importance. He was reviewing a tablet as he walked, his brow furrowed in concentration. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his lips were set in a permanent line of disapproval. Everything about him screamed power and control. Sophia watched him approach, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and annoyance. She had seen powerful men before, but there was something about his arrogance that rubbed her the wrong way. When he stopped at their station without looking up from his tablet, she felt her spine stiffen. "The Morrison account?" he said without greeting anyone. His voice was deep and commanding, the kind of voice that expected immediate obedience. "Mrs. Morrison complained that her room service was delayed by 10 minutes yesterday. This is unacceptable." Jessica immediately began apologizing and explaining, but Damien held up one hand to silence her. His eyes finally lifted from the tablet, scanning the nurse's station until they landed on Sophia. She was the only one not looking nervous or apologetic. "You're new," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Sophia Rain," she replied, extending her hand with a confident smile. "We must be the owner who thinks 10 minutes is worth a public." Scolding. The silence that followed was so complete that Sophia could hear her own heartbeat. Jessica looked like she might faint. The other nurses stared in shock. No one spoke to Damien Cross that way, but instead of exploding with anger, Damien found himself studying this fearless blonde woman who dared to challenge him on her first day. Her green eyes held no fear, no deference, just honest directness. It had been years since someone had spoken to him as an equal rather than a superior. 10 minutes might not seem important to you, Miss Rain, he said slowly, but our patience. Pay premium prices for premium service. Every detail matters. Of course it matters, Sophia agreed, still holding his gaze. But so does treating your staff with respect. Good employees work better when they're valued, not terrorized. The word terrorized hung in the air like a challenge. Damien's gray eyes narrowed slightly, but there was something new in them. Interest, perhaps, or amusement. "Is that your professional opinion, Miss Rain?" "It's my human opinion, Mr. Cross." Dance begins for a moment. They simply stared at each other. The hallway around them seemed to fade away as some invisible current passed between them. Damien found himself noticing details he normally wouldn't care about. The way her nose crinkled slightly when she was being defiant. The fact that her uniform was perfectly pressed, despite being simple and standard. The small scar on her chin that suggested an interesting story. Sophia, meanwhile, was surprised to discover that behind his cold exterior, Damien Cross had the most beautiful eyes she had ever seen. They were stormy gray, like the sky before a thunderstorm. And despite their hardness, she caught a glimpse of something deeper, something lonely. "Room 847 needs fresh flowers," Damien said finally, turning his attention back to his tablet. "Patient specifically requested white roses." "I'll handle it personally," Jessica said quickly, clearly eager to end this unprecedented confrontation. "Actually," Damien said, his eyes finding Sophia again, "Miss Rain can handle it. Consider it." Part of her orientation was clearly a test, and everyone knew it. Sophia simply nodded. "Of course. White roses for room 847. Premium quality," Damien added. "Mrs. Chen is the wife of a senator. She has very specific standards." "Don't we all?" Sophia replied with a sweet smile that somehow managed to be both polite and mildly sarcastic. Damien almost smiled. Almost instead, he turned and walked away, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and the feeling that something important had just happened. The challenge accepted. As soon as the elevator doors closed behind Damien, the nurse's station exploded into whispered conversations. "I can't believe you spoke to him like that," Jessica said, looking both impressed and terrified. "In 5 years, I've never seen anyone challenge him so directly." "She seems to respond well to honesty," Sophia said, though she was surprised by her own boldness. Something about Damien Cross had awakened a fighting spirit in her that she didn't even know she possessed. "Most people are too intimidated to be honest with him," said Maria, another nurse. "His family owns half the medical facilities in the state. He could blacklist you from working anywhere." Sophia considered this as she went about her duties for the rest of the morning. She delivered the white roses to Mrs. Chen, who turned out to be a lovely woman with genuine gratitude for the small gesture. She administered medications, checked on patients, and slowly began to understand the rhythm of this very different kind of hospital. But her thoughts kept returning to those gray eyes and the challenge she had seen in them. Damien Cross was clearly used to having power over everyone around him, but he had seemed almost intrigued by her refusal to be intimidated. The second encounter at exactly 2 o'clock. Sophia was updating patient charts when she felt a familiar presence behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know that Damien had returned. "How did Mrs. Chen like the roses?" he asked. Sophia finished writing before turning to face him. She also mentioned that the previous flowers had been replaced daily, but she preferred having the same arrangement for several days so she could watch them bloom fully.
Damien's eyebrows rose slightly.
You discussed flower philosophy with a patient. I listened to what she wanted instead of assuming I knew better, Sophia corrected. There's a difference. And what else did Mrs. Chen tell you during this philosophical discussion? Sophia smiled, recognizing another test. She told me that her husband is considering a large donation to expand the children's wing, but she's concerned about whether the hospital's leadership truly cares about patients as people, not just as sources of revenue. This time, Damien's expression shifted noticeably. The donation Mrs. Chen had mentioned was something he had been pursuing for months, and it was worth millions of dollars. What was your response? I told her that I was new here, but that I believed. Any hospital that hired nurses who cared about flower preferences was probably on the right track. Damien stared at her for a long moment. You turned a simple flower delivery into a public relations opportunity. I had a conversation with a lonely woman who wanted someone to listen to her. The rest was just honest observation. The walls began to crack for the first time in years. Damien found himself genuinely curious about an employee. Most people either feared him or tried to impress him. Sophia Rain seemed to do neither. She simply treated him like a person, which was both refreshing and unsettling. Walk with me, he said suddenly. It wasn't a request, but Sophia noticed that his tone was different. From the commanding voice he had used earlier, she fell into step beside him as they moved through the hospital corridors. Why did you take this job? He asked as they walked. Better pay, she answered honestly. My brother is in college and my parents have already sacrificed enough for our education. Can make more money in pharmaceutical sales or private practice nursing. I could, she agreed. But I became a nurse to help people, not to get rich. They stopped in front of a large window that overlooked the hospital's garden. It was beautifully maintained, with paths winding between flower beds and small benches, where patients and families could find peaceful moments. Do you think I don't care about helping people? Damien asked quietly. The question surprised Sophia with its vulnerability. She studied his profile as he looked out at the garden, noting the tension in his jaw and the way his hands were clasped. Behind his back, I think you care very much, she said finally. But I think you've forgotten that healing isn't just about medical procedures. It's about human connection. Damien turned to look at her, and for a moment his carefully constructed mask slipped. She saw exhaustion in his eyes, and something that looked like loneliness. Human connection is inefficient, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Maybe, Sophia said softly. But it's also what makes life worth living. They stood in silence for a moment, watching people move through the garden below. An elderly man was pushing his wife in a wheelchair, stopping occasionally to point out different flowers. A young mother was reading to her child on one of the benches. A nurse was sitting with a patient who seemed to be sharing something important. Tomorrow, Damien said suddenly, I want you to show me how you think we can improve patient satisfaction without compromising efficiency. Sophia blinked in surprise. What? You want my opinion on hospital operations? I want your perspective. Corrected. There's a difference. As he walked away, Sophia realized that something had changed between them. The arrogant billionaire was still there, but she had glimpsed the man underneath. And despite all her good sense telling her otherwise, she found herself looking forward to tomorrow's conversation. The Ice King was beginning to melt, and Sophia Rain was discovering that she might be the only one with the warmth to complete. The transformation the next morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the hospital's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floors. Sophia had spent half the night thinking about her conversation with Damien, wondering if she had imagined the vulnerability she thought she saw in his eyes. In the harsh light of day, it seemed impossible that the cold billionaire could be anything other than exactly what he appeared to be. She arrived early, determined to be prepared for whatever challenge he had planned for her. The hospital felt different in the early hours, quieter and more peaceful. The night shift nurses were finishing their rounds, and the day staff hadn't yet arrived in full force. It was during these quiet moments that Sophia felt most connected to why she had become a nurse in the first place. At exactly 8 o'clock, Damien appeared at the nurse's station wearing another perfectly tailored suit, this one charcoal gray, that made his eyes look like storm clouds. His hair was immaculate as always, and he carried himself with the same commanding presence that seemed to part crowds wherever he went. "Miss Rain," he said, his voice neutral but somehow more personal than the day before. "Are you ready for your assignment?" Sophia straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. "I'm ready for whatever you think will prove your point about efficiency versus compassion." A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. "Confident. I like that." He gestured toward the elevator. "We're going to the VIP floor. I want you to observe how we currently handle our most demanding patients. And then tell me how your human connection theory would improve their experience without adding costs or time." As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Sophia was acutely aware of Damien's presence beside her. He smelled like expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine that made her pulse quicken despite her determination to remain professional. She stole a glance at his profile, noting the strong line of his jaw and the way his long fingers drummed silently against his tablet. "Nervous?" he asked, without looking at her. "Curious," she replied. "About why this matters so much to you?" Elevator doors opened before he could respond, revealing a floor that looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital wing. The walls were covered in rich wood paneling, original artwork hung in gilt frames, and fresh orchids graced every surface. Even the nurse's station looked like it belonged in a high-end spa. The Ice Queen patient, their first stop was room 1205, where they encountered Mrs. Victoria Sterling, a woman in her 60s, who wore her wealth like armor and her dissatisfaction like a crown. She was sitting in her hospital bed as if it were a throne, perfectly made up despite having undergone surgery just 2 days earlier. Her private nurse, a young woman named Beth, was clearly struggling to meet the woman's impossible demands. "Oh. Temperature in this room is completely wrong," Mrs. Sterling was saying as they entered. "It was too cold an hour ago, too warm 30 minutes ago, and now it's too cold again. How difficult is it to maintain a consistent 72 degrees? Beth looked exhausted and frustrated. "I've adjusted the thermostat 3 times, Mrs. Sterling. The system needs time to regulate." "Time?" Mrs. Sterling's voice rose an octave. "I'm paying $15,000 a day for this room. Time should not be a factor." Damien stepped forward with his professional smile, the one that never reached his eyes. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm Damien Cross, the owner. Is there anything I can personally do to improve your comfort?" Mrs. Sterling's demeanor changed instantly, her anger transforming into the simpering sweetness that wealthy women often use with powerful men. "Mr. Cross, how wonderful to meet you. I was just explaining to this ... person that the service here is not quite what I expected." Sophia watched this interaction with growing irritation. She could see the hurt in Beth's eyes. The way the young nurse's shoulders sagged with defeat, Mrs. Sterling wasn't really upset about the temperature. She was upset about something else entirely, and she was taking it out on the easiest target. "Mrs. Sterling," Sophia said, stepping forward before she could stop herself. "May I ask how you're feeling today? Not about the room, but about how you're healing?" The older woman looked surprised to be addressed directly by someone she clearly considered beneath her notice. "I beg your pardon?" Sophia continued, her voice warm and genuine. "Even when everything goes perfectly, it's natural to feel anxious about recovery. Sometimes when we can't control the big things, we focus on smaller details like room temperature." For a moment, Mrs. Sterling's mask slipped, and Sophia saw genuine vulnerability in her eyes. "The surgery was more extensive than they initially thought," she admitted quietly. "The doctor said everything went well, but I can't help wondering if something might go wrong." Sophia moved closer to the bed, her manner gentle and reassuring. "That's completely normal. Would it help if we went over your recovery timeline together? Sometimes understanding exactly what to expect can make the healing process feel less overwhelming." As Sophia spent the next 15 minutes patiently explaining Mrs. Sterling's post-operative care plan, answering questions, and providing genuine reassurance, Damien watched in fascination. The angry, demanding patient transformed into a worried but grateful woman. Beth, the nurse, visibly relaxed as the hostile atmosphere in the room dissolved. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling," said finally, and her gratitude was real. "I feel much better about everything now." The revelation outside the room, Damien walked beside Sophia in silence for several minutes. She could feel him processing what he had witnessed, and she waited for his verdict. "The temperature complaints stopped," he said finally. "They were never." "Really about temperature?" Sophia replied. She was scared and feeling helpless, so she focused on something she thought she could control. "You spent 15 minutes in that room. Our protocol calls for 5-minute check-ins to maximize efficiency." Sophia stopped walking and turned to face him. "And how much time do you think Beth would have spent over the next week dealing with constant complaints and requests? How much time would you have spent handling escalating dissatisfaction? How much would it have cost if Mrs. Sterling left negative reviews or withdrew her family's future business?" Damien considered this, his gray eyes thoughtful. "You're suggesting that investing time initially saves time overall." "I'm suggesting that treating people like human beings instead of profit centers actually improves your bottom line," Sophia said. "Happy patients heal faster, complain less, and refer their friends." They continued their rounds, visiting 6 more VIP patients. In each room, Sophia demonstrated her approach of genuine human connection. She listened to Mr. Thompson's concerns about missing his grandson's birthday. She admired Mrs. Rodriguez's photos of her garden and learned about her passion for growing heirloom tomatoes. She sat with teenage Madison Clark, who was recovering from appendix surgery and worried about missing her senior prom. In every case, Damien observed how Sophia's authentic interest in the patients as people transformed the atmosphere. Complaints decreased, cooperation increased, and the overall mood of the entire floor seemed lighter. The private conversation that afternoon, Damien asked Sophia to join him in his office for what he called a debriefing session. His office was as impressive as she had expected, with its panoramic city view and furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. But what surprised her were the personal touches. A photo of an elderly woman with kind eyes, a small, potted plant that looked well cared for, and a bookshelf that contained novels alongside medical journals. "Coffee?" he offered, gesturing toward an expensive-looking machine in the corner. "Please," Sophia said, settling into one of the leather chairs across from his desk as he prepared their drinks. She found herself studying him more carefully. Without the audience of staff and patients, his movements were less rigid, more natural. He had removed his suit jacket, and she could see the strong lines of his shoulders beneath his crisp white shirt. "You're not what I expected," he said, handing her a cup of perfectly brewed coffee. "What did you expect? Someone who would be impressed by all of this?" He gestured around the office. "Someone who would agree with everything I said and tell me how brilliant my methods are." Sophia sipped her coffee, considering her response. "And instead, you got someone who thinks your methods need work." "I got someone who made me question everything I thought I knew about running a hospital," he corrected. "Do you have any idea how unsettling that is?" There was something almost vulnerable in his admission, and Sophia felt her heart soften toward him. Change is always unsettling. That doesn't mean it's wrong. Damien moved to the window, looking out at the city below. "I built this empire by being ruthless, by focusing on results instead of feelings. Emotions complicate things, make them messy and unpredictable. They also make them human," Sophia said softly. "When did you decide that being human was a weakness?" The question hung in the air between them. Damien was quiet for so long that Sophia wondered if he was going to answer at all. "My father died when I was 15, he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "Heart attack in the middle of a business meeting. He was passionate about everything, his work, his family, his beliefs, all that passion, all those emotions, and in the end, his heart just stopped." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm sorry." The doctor said stress was a contributing factor. He cared too much, felt too deeply, and it literally killed him. Damien turned back to face her, his expression guarded. "I decided that day that emotions were dangerous luxuries I couldn't afford." "So you built walls," Sophia said, understanding. Flooding through her? "I built success," he corrected. I built an empire that helps thousands of people. I saved lives by being logical instead of emotional. You saved lives, Sophia agreed. But did you save your own? The question seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He stared at her for a long moment, his carefully constructed mask wavering. What do you mean? When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy? Odd. When did you last laugh until your sides hurt or stay up all night? Talking to someone, or feel genuine joy about anything that wasn't related to profit margins? Damien opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of realizations he wasn't ready to voice. The crack in the armor, I should get back to my patients, Sophia said finally, sensing that she had pushed him as far as he could go for one day. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Sophia. It was the first time he had used her first name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. Yes. Would you... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. Would you have dinner with me? Not here in the hospital, somewhere normal. I want to understand this human connection theory of yours better. Sophia turned back to face him, seeing past his confident facade to the uncertain man beneath. Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Cross? I'm asking you to help me remember how to be human, he said quietly. Please, call me Damien. The vulnerability in his request took her breath away. This powerful, seemingly untouchable man was asking her to teach him something that most people learned as children. How to connect, how to feel, how to be genuinely present with another person. Okay, she said softly, but I have one condition. What's that? No talk about hospital business, profit margins, or efficiency ratings. Just two people having a conversation. Damien smiled, and this time it reached his eyes, transforming his entire face. I'm not sure I remember how to do that. Then it's a good thing I'm a teacher at heart, Sophia replied, returning his smile. As she left his office, Sophia realized that she was looking forward to dinner more than she should be. The Ice King was melting, and she was discovering that beneath all, that Frost was a man worth knowing. But she also knew that helping someone learn to feel again was dangerous territory, because somewhere in the process of teaching Damien Cross to be human, she was running the risk of losing her heart to him completely. The evening couldn't come soon enough. And that thought both thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. The restaurant Damien chose was nothing like Sophia expected. Instead of an expensive, intimidating establishment where wealthy people went to see and be seen, it selected a small Italian place tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The lighting was warm and golden. Candles flickered on checkered tablecloths, and the air was filled with the comforting aroma of garlic and fresh herbs. Sophia arrived wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders for the first time since Damien had known her. When she saw him waiting at a corner table, she barely recognized him. Gone was the intimidating business suit, replaced by dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made him look younger and more approachable. His usually perfect hair was slightly tousled, as if he had been running his fingers through it nervously. You look beautiful, he said as she approached, standing to pull out her chair like a gentleman. You look human, she replied with a teasing smile, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh. Is that a compliment or an observation? Both, Sophia said, settling into her seat and looking around the cozy restaurant. This place is wonderful. How did you find it? Damien looked almost embarrassed. I Googled normal restaurants where normal people eat. This was the first result that didn't have a wine list longer than a medical textbook. The admission was so endearingly awkward that Sophia felt her heart skip a beat. What made you think I was normal people? Everything, he said simply, his gray eyes serious. Everything about you is real in a way I'd forgotten existed. Learning to be human, their conversation over dinner was unlike anything Damien had experienced in years. Without the pressure of business discussions or the need to maintain his authoritative image, he found himself sharing stories he hadn't thought about in decades. He told Sophia about his childhood before his father's death, when he had been a boy who collected baseball cards and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian because he loved animals. What changed your mind about veterinary medicine? Sophia asked, twirling pasta around her fork. Reality, Damien said, but there was sadness in his voice rather than bitterness. After Dad died, I realized that dreams were luxuries my family couldn't afford. Mom was struggling to keep the house, and I had a choice between following my heart or building something that could provide security. So you chose security. I chose responsibility, he corrected, though I'm beginning to wonder if there was a third option I never considered. Sophia reached across the table and touched his hand gently. The contact was brief, but it sent electricity shooting through both of them. It's never too late to find that third option. As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself falling for the man Damien was beneath his armor. He was funny when he let himself relax, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He was intelligent, but not in the cold, calculating way she had first perceived. Instead, his intelligence was curious and engaged, asking thoughtful questions about her life, her dreams, her philosophy about healing. "Tell me about your family," he said over dessert, leaning forward with genuine interest. Sophia's face lit up as she described her parents, both teachers who had instilled in her a love of learning and service. She talked about her younger brother Jake, who was studying engineering and had dreams of designing hospitals that would be both efficient and humane. She shared stories of Sunday dinners where everyone talked at once, of birthday celebrations that involved homemade cakes and silly traditions of a childhood filled with love, even when money was tight. "They sound wonderful," Damien said, and there was longing in his voice. "They are," Sophia agreed. "But they're not perfect. We've had our struggles, our disagreements, our moments of doubt. The difference is that we weathered them together instead of building walls to protect ourselves." "Is that what you think I've done? Built walls?" Sophia studied his face in the candlelight, seeing the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. "I think you built a fortress. The question is whether you're protecting what's inside or keeping yourself prisoner." The emergency that brought them together, their dinner, was interrupted by the urgent buzzing of both their phones. Damien answered first, his expression immediately shifting to one of intense concern. "What kind of accident?" he said into the phone. "How many casualties?" "Yes, I'm on my way." Sophia was already standing, recognizing the tone of a medical emergency. "What's happening?" "Multi-car accident on the interstate. At least 12 people injured, several critical. They're bringing them to our trauma center." Damien was already signaling for the check, his relaxed demeanor replaced by focused urgency. "I'm coming with you," Sophia said, and when he started to protest, she cut him off. "This is what I do, Damien. This is who I am." 20 minutes later, they were racing through the hospital corridors as ambulances screamed into the emergency bay. The trauma center had been transformed into controlled chaos, with medical teams preparing for the incoming wave of patients. Sophia grabbed scrubs from a supply closet. Changing quickly as Damien coordinated with the emergency staff, the first ambulance arrived carrying a family of 4 whose car had been crushed when a truck lost control. The father was conscious, but had severe chest injuries. The mother was unconscious with head trauma. And their 2 children, a boy of 8 and a girl of 6, were both crying and bleeding from multiple cuts. "I need the parents in trauma 1 and 2, called Dr. Martinez, the head of emergency medicine. "Get the children to pediatric." "No," screamed the little boy, clinging to his unconscious mother. "I won't leave Mommy." The medical team tried to separate the family, but the children became hysterical, their cries echoing through the trauma bay. The distress was affecting everyone, making it harder for the medical team to focus on their life-saving work. Sophia appeared at the boy's side, kneeling down to his eye level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Tommy," he sobbed. "Is Mommy going to die?" "Tommy, my name is Sophia, and I'm a nurse. The doctors are going to take very good care of your Mommy and Daddy, but right now I need you to be brave and help me take care of your sister. Can you do that?" The little boy looked at her with eyes full of terror and trust. "Will you promise to tell me if Mommy wakes up?" "I promise," Sophia said solemnly. "But first, let's get you and your sister cleaned up so you can be ready to see them when they're feeling better." As Sophia gently led the children away, talking to them in soothing tones and engaging them in age-appropriate explanations of what was happening, Damien found himself watching in amazement. She had transformed a situation that was spiraling out of control into one of calm cooperation, all while maintaining the children's dignity and emotional well-being. The moment of truth for the next 6 hours, Damien and Sophia worked side by side in ways they never had before, not as owner and employee, not as authority figure and subordinate, but as equal partners in the fight to save lives. Sophia moved between patients with the grace of a dancer and the precision of a surgeon, anticipating needs, providing comfort, and serving as a bridge between the medical team and the frightened families when the mother from the car accident began to crash. Her blood pressure dropping dangerously low, it was Sophia who noticed the subtle changes in her condition before. The monitors even registered the problem. When an elderly man arrived, having a heart attack, triggered by the stress of witnessing the accident, Sophia was there to hold his hand and talk him through his fear, while the cardiologist worked to save his life, and through it all, himself not just observing but truly seeing the difference that human compassion made in the healing process. He watched Sophia sit with a teenage girl who had lost her best friend in the accident, providing a presence that no medication could replace. He saw her coordinate with families, explain procedures with patience and clarity, and somehow manage to be exactly where she was needed most. "She's remarkable," Dr. Martinez said to Damien during a brief break between patients. "I've never seen anyone connect with people the way she does. It's like she has a sixth sense for what they need." Damien nodded, unable to take his eyes off Sophia as she knelt beside a scared child, making him laugh despite his injuries. "She's teaching me that everything I thought I knew about medicine was only half the story." As dawn broke over the city, the last of the accident victims had been stabilized and admitted to appropriate care. The trauma center slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the intensity of the night had left everyone emotionally drained. Sophia found herself sitting on a bench in the hospital's garden, still wearing scrubs, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I thought I might find you here," Damien said. Settling beside her on the bench, they sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the events of the night. Sophia had grass stains on her scrubs from sitting with the children in the garden earlier, and her hair was escaping from its ponytail in soft curls around her face. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "The Morrison family," Sophia said. "Finally, the parents are going to be okay." "Thanks to you," Damien replied. "If you hadn't kept those children calm, if you hadn't noticed the mother's blood pressure dropping, ... It wasn't just me," Sophia interrupted. "It was all of us working together. That's what healing really is, Damien. All the answers. It's a team of people who care, supporting each other and the patients." The confession. Damien turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense in the morning light.
Right.
"Sophia, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I've spent 13 years building walls around my heart, convincing myself that feelings were weaknesses, that would destroy me the way I thought they destroyed my father." His voice was quiet but steady. "But watching you last night, seeing the way you heal people not just with medicine but with genuine human connection, I realized something." Sophia's heart began to race, but she remained silent, sensing that he needed to finish his thought. "I realized that my father didn't die because he felt too much. He died because life is fragile and unpredictable, and the only thing that gives it meaning is the connections we make with other people." Damien reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You've shown me that I haven't been protecting myself all these years. I've been suffocating myself." Damien ... "I love you," he said simply, the words falling between them like flower petals. "I love your compassion, your strength, your refusal to be intimidated by my walls. I love the way you see people, really see them, and make them feel valued and heard. I love that you challenged me from the very first day, and I love that you're teaching me how to be human again." Tears gathered in Sophia's eyes as she looked at this powerful, complicated man who was offering her his heart with such honest vulnerability. "I love you too," she whispered. "I love the man you are underneath all that armor. I love your intelligence and your dedication and the way you're brave enough to change. I love that you're willing to let me see your fears and your dreams." When he kissed her, it was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms winding around his neck. It was a kiss that tasted like new beginnings and second chances. like the promise of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. The new beginning, 6 months later, Platinum Medical Center had been transformed. Under Damien's new leadership, philosophy, guided by Sophia's insights about human-centered care, the hospital had become a place where medical excellence and emotional healing worked hand in hand. Patient satisfaction scores had reached record highs. Staff turnover had dropped dramatically. The hospital had received national recognition for its innovative approach to healthcare. But the most significant transformation was in Damien himself. The cold, intimidating billionaire had been replaced by a man who knew how to laugh, how to listen, and how to lead with both his mind and his heart. He still wore expensive suits and made important business decisions, but now he also spent time talking to patients, supporting his staff, finding joy in the small moments that made life meaningful. On a warm spring evening, Damien and Sophia stood on the hospital's rooftop garden, looking out over the city lights. The garden had been Sophia's idea, a place where patients and families could find peace and hope during difficult times. It had become one of the hospital's most beloved features. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophia asked, leaning against the railing with Damien's arms wrapped around her from behind. "Regret what? Letting me tear down your walls? Opening yourself up to all the essences of human emotion?" Damien pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo.
Never.
"You didn't tear down my walls, Sophia. You showed me that they were never protecting me at all. They were just keeping me from living. And now I'm living," he said simply. "For the first time in 13 years, I'm really living." As they stood together under the stars, surrounded by the garden that symbolized growth and new life, both Sophia and Damien knew that they had found something rare and precious. They had found love that was strong enough to overcome fear, compassion that could heal the deepest wounds, and the courage to be vulnerable with another person. The Ice King had melted completely, not through force or manipulation, but through the gentle warmth of genuine human connection. And in learning to love Sophia, Damien had also learned to love himself, to forgive his past, and to embrace a future filled with possibility. Their love story would become legendary at Platinum Medical Center, a reminder to everyone who worked there that healing comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful medicine of all is simply caring enough to see the person behind the patient, the human being behind the authority figure, and the heart that beats beneath even the most carefully constructed armor. In the end, the arrogant director had indeed met his weakness, but that weakness had become his greatest strength, transforming not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. Love had conquered all, just as it always does when we're brave enough to let it in.